It's so easy to forget that not everybody is actually on social media, and those people are unfortunately missing out on lots and lots of match results. And because I haven't been uploading any live match footage onto this channel, I just haven't been able to update on lots of you on how my FEEDER Masters campaign has been going. It's been a tough one so far, but this is an upload just to give you a bit of a rundown on my last 5 FEEDER Master qualifiers. If you're not familiar with FEEDER Masters, it's an individual feeder fishing competition, and it's now widely regarded as the premier individual feeder fishing event in Europe. It's a competition that takes place on a wide variety of venues up and down the country. I think there are 20 qualifiers altogether. Each qualifier sees 60 anglers competing for 3 places in the big money final at Tamar Lakes in September. The 60 pegs are split into 3 zones of 20, and in order to qualify you've got to win your 20 peg zone. Now, these matches that I'm going to tell you about aren't in any particular order, but the first one was from Carmill Lakes. This is, it's a cracking complex. It's absolutely stuffed with fish. I've spent quite a bit of time on that venue over the years. However, it is the middle of summer, and I actually drew on the point of the island on Match Lake. Now, it looks really inviting. I've never drawn there before, and there were 20 anglers on Match Lake, so in order for me to qualify in this competition I would have had to have won the whole lake. Now, it's summer, there were fish down the margins, and there were loads and loads of fish cruising about on the top, as you would expect during the summer months. But as it's a feeder fishing event, that wasn't exactly ideal for the way that the fish wanted to be caught or fed. We're fishing on the bottom with a feeder and all the fish are cruising around up in the air, but that's all part of the challenge. I've never drawn that peg before, and unfortunately, whilst this island looks incredibly inviting and it did have fish cruising around it, I didn't realise quite how snaggy it was. I went across there with a bomb before the start of the match just to see if it was nice and clean and clear, just so I could clip up the reel at the right range, and I didn't find any snags whatsoever. But then, as what happens occasionally is that as soon as you clip a feeder on and start fishing your match, you suddenly start finding snags, and that's exactly what happened. I started my match right the way across up towards the island, and I just couldn't fish it. I lost 6 setups altogether, so I lost 6 feeders. I had to set back up again, and each time I lost a rig I kind of kept moving away from the island, just trying to find a clear spot, because I wanted to fish there before my margins kicked in. And I must have ended up about 5 meters away from the island before I actually found a clear spot. The ironic thing was that when I found that clear spot, I had a run of 5 fish, 5 decent carp, which kind of got me back in it. But it was quite clear that down to my left, the middle part of that bank, on the grass bank, there are lots and lots of features there, lots of lilies there are some reed beds, and that's where the fish were being caught. The fish were in those reed beds, or they were feeding more confidently under the reed beds as opposed to the open water or the really shallow margins, featureless margins that we had, and that's where all the fish were caught. I ended the match with 80 plus pounds, so I ended up with a day's fishing. I caught some fish close in later on, but I was always playing catch up. The lads that caught in the middle part of the section caught really close, and just fishing close to the features all day. And 80 odd pound was a good weight anyway on the day, but it would have needed 150 pound to qualify. And whilst my tactics, or the tactics that I used that day, weren't going to get 150 pound, there was definitely enough fish in my peg throughout the 5 hours for me to have caught some. So I'm not really counting that as a chance, that one. But it was a frustrating match when you can see the fish there in front of you, but you just can't quite get to them. And then you just have a look at the stamp of fish that were being caught, when some of them, they were averaging 8-9 pound. It doesn't take many of those to find a way of where you could have got that weight that you would have needed to qualify. So whilst it was a great trip to Larford, but it was just a case of learning what I did from that day and rolling with it and taking that forward to the next qualifier. JCB Lakes, it's a venue that I've known about for several years, but I've never ever even seen it before. So I did a little bit of research online, and I actually drew on the main lake, right in the middle of the main lake, and we kind of just understood that it was all about big carp. We knew that there were bream in there, so I was going to go down an approach which would solely revolve around the method feeder. I assumed from the information that I had and from speaking to some of the people on the bank that you would need carp. You couldn't win with bream, you could only win with carp, so that's what I did. And it turned out into being a very kind of slow day, to be honest. It was just one of those days where you had to be really patient, and you had to be really confident in your approach. The key thing for me on that, or the key detail for that match for me, was to fish a nice large method feeder or an open method feeder. It was the 32 gram one that I used. Just load it with pellets, a nice big 10mm washout wafter, and just sit and wait. Be very patient. It was a case of putting the feeder in the open water where you think the best place would be to nail a fish, because you're only after one at a time. There was a little bit of breeze hitting the water, and it turned out to be harder than expected, but I ended up catching 4 carp that day, which was I was incredibly pleased about, you know, because there weren't any carp caught around me. We saw the odd fish move on the surface, but it was a very quiet day. So I ended up with 4 carp that day for £32. I ended up winning the section, which I was really pleased about, especially with it being on the method feeder, because that patient kind of proper carp method feeder fishing it's not something I've done a lot of. You know, I've done a little bit of it at Barston Lakes, but you know, it was just one of those things that, you know, had the zone been split slightly differently, I'm sure I would have qualified with that weight, but all the fish were caught down at the other end of the lake. So yeah, so I won the section, so it was good to get a few coins back to help pay for the day. But again, it was just kind of, you know, learning from my first visit to that venue, and I'm sure I'll be going back there next year, in assuming it gets used again next year, in another FEEDER Masters qualifier. The wonderful Barston Lakes. This was a qualifier that I was really looking forward to, because I don't really get a chance to fish Barston much during the summer months, and when I drew on the riverbank, I couldn't believe it. I haven't been on that bank for about 4 or 5 years. Usually, you know, through that period I've drawn on the road bank, so it was good to be going there. However, I spoke to 2 or 3 big name anglers, and they basically thought that I was on one of the worst pegs in the zone. I was on peg 30, and it's the last peg in that front zone, and they actually split it there where all the early numbered pegs, so I don't know what the first peg was, maybe it was probably peg 8, and it ran right the way around that riverbank, and now those pegs there are actually competing against the well-known pegs 124, 123, 122, so you're kind of fishing the same water rather than just have all the 20 pegs zone all down one bank. And I completely agree with that. I think that is the best way of doing it. But I was peg 30, so I was the furthest away from that big open water area. So I didn't know what to expect, but the wind was blowing from left and in to my margin as well, and that looked really inviting. However, I've never caught any fish at Barston down the margin. And it was a slow start. You know, I think I just had 1 bream out in the open water on the method feeder. It was all about the method feeder. I wasn't going to go down the route of fishing a cage feeder for bream and skimmers. I just thought, especially in that zone, you would need carp to win, so that's exactly what I did. I committed the full 5 hours to fishing for carp, and you know, I just obviously stuck to that. But I didn't catch anything in the open water. It was just completely dead. There weren't any fish caught around me. We heard that there was 2 or 3 carp being caught right down to my left in the teens, or the favoured teens, which is where a lot of people wanted to draw. But the wind kept blowing into that margin, and you know, I thought I just need to do something here. You know, I needed to try and give myself a bit of confidence that, you know, I was going to catch something, or certainly have a number of fish turn up. But I felt as though I needed to do something to try and stop any passing fish, try and get them to stop in front of me. You know, it was a summer's day, we'd seen fish cruising about on the top, and I just thought the only way I can do that is to feed heavy somewhere. Now, I hadn't seen any fish caught on that 20-metre line. I had a method feeder for that line, and I had a couple of little skimmers on it. It just wasn't going to get going, and you know, I didn't have any signs of carp on there, so I decided to do that down the margin. So basically I got a 1-pint tub, filled it with pellets, tipped water in, and just left it. Let the pellets soak in all the water, so they were really nice and sloppy. And I put 4 cages right down my right-hand margin next to the rushes, and I left it 10 minutes. And to cut long story short, when I went on that line, the rod nearly got pulled in, and I actually got cut off as the fish has gone round the reeds. I was fishing with 8-pound main line. As it's gone round the reeds, it's actually cut the line. You know, it was a big double figure fish, because when I hooked it, because it's so shallow, you actually see the bow wave, you can see how big the fish are, and it went round the corner and it's just cut me off. I couldn't believe it. I was, you know, I was happy that it had worked, that, you know, it had given me confidence that the fish were going to come into that water, but obviously I was gutted to lose a big double figure fish like that. So because there was an hour and a half left, I wasn't too upset, because I thought, well, there's another hour and a half here for me to, you know, hopefully get some more fish down that margin. So I just set the peg up again, and I went back out onto the 20 metre line. Didn't catch anything on there, and then I've gone onto this margin line again, and it's gone, and straight away, and I've got one at 8 pound, which was great. Like I say, not a massive fish, but with nearly an hour and a half to go, I just kind of felt I could do a bit of damage here, you know, and possibly try and catch some of them up if I can keep the fish there. And I did something that I don't normally do. Normally I would fish that out after I've set it up, just set it up for one at a time. But what I did was I decided to be much more aggressive with it. So I put another 4 cages in, which is a lot for me. You know, I don't normally like to feed as heavy as that, especially in such shallow water with pellets. And something else that I did that I've never done before, and that is I went straight over the top of it. Because time was a bit of an issue, and because I felt as though maybe crashing the feed in, obviously the feed was bringing fish in, but I thought the noise of it going in as well was bringing fish in, so I went straight over the top of it, and the rod nearly went off the rest again. And I played a fish for 2 or 3 minutes. It was another big double, and I don't know if it was hooked right or not, I don't know, but it pulled out at the net, you know, well, about 2 meters from the net. I was really annoyed at that, you know, because I didn't rush that fish in anyway. I took my time with it. I knew how important it could be, and it's just come off at the net. So I've been really upset about that. I tried to, well, I've just shook it off, you know. I didn't ponder on that, but by any means, you know. I put another 4 cages in, and I went straight in over the top, and I ended up with 4 carp, and the biggest one was 17 pounds. You know, I ended up with 57 pounds, which from nowhere, and I thought, you know, I thought those 2 fish were going to cost me. You know, I knew it had fished better down to my left, but as it turned out, it hadn't fished as good as what we thought. And, you know, the few fish that had been caught, they were good fish. So that was really annoying. I ended up winning the section again, which obviously softened the blow a little bit. But, you know, you can't help but look back and see where you could have got, you know, that extra £1.50. But, you know, that's what it was. You know, you live and learn. And I learned a lot from that match about fishing that venue during the summer months. So it was good to get the section win again, but obviously, as always, it was just a case of taking on board what you've learnt and rolling on to the next one. Barston played host to another qualifier, but this time I was on my more familiar surroundings of the roadside. I didn't draw in a very good area, to be fair, but, you know, again, it was baking hot. It was flat calm, the sunshine was out. We expected it being hard, and one thing I've got to say about this particular match is that in all the years I've been going to Barston Lakes, I have never ever seen as many fish cruising about on the surface as what we actually saw on that match. Literally end to end, from bank to bank, it was just solid with fish just cruising around, carp and F1s. I've never seen so many fish. And the amazing thing was that as soon as the match started, whilst a lot of those fish were still out there cruising around, to say it was only this deep, we never had an indication. It was amazing how few line bites we actually had, considering how many fish were moving about. So, you know, when you sat there with a motionless tip, whether it be in winter or summer, you know, it's quite easy to think that the fish aren't there. And, you know, that 100% proved that, you know, you can have hundreds of fish passing over your feeder between here and where your feeder is, and you're not going to see an indication on your tip, you know, when they're really high up in the water. But it fished hard, you know, and, you know, I had a couple of bream on the method. I committed completely again slowly to carp. I didn't think you were going to win anything with skimmers, or certainly not on a feeder approach. You were going to catch enough of those small skimmers to justify winning the zone. So I just stuck for carp. So I fished the method feeder on 2 lines, one at about 25 meters, where I fed it with a cage feeder quite aggressively. And I also fed the margins again, obviously from what I'd learnt on the previous match, but the margins there very, very rarely produce, you know. There aren't many features there, and they are very shallow as well, but I still fed there. And I fished a method feeder out into the open water, where I planned on being quite mobile. The plan was to start at about 50 meters, and then I just work my way left or right and work my way out as the match went. And to be quite honest, it was really hard. I had a couple of bream early on, and then Danny Wilson on my right got a carp, about £6 I think it was, and then there was another carp caught. So we knew there were one or two being caught, but like I say, it was hard, and I honestly thought that the only way I was going to get away at the halfway stage would be to just fish for proper fish. You know, I just fished for bigger fish, in the sense that if I was only going to get one or two bites, then I wanted them to be big fish. So I stepped up to I think it was a 12mm wafter and a nice big size 10 hook that matched with it nicely. I put the largest open method feeder on that I'd got, and I really just loaded it up. You know, I really mounted it on really tightly though, obviously, to try and make sure or ensure it didn't come off on impact. A nice big 12mm wafter, and I just played the waiting game. You know, I just thought there are that many fish cruising about out there. I put loads and loads of glug on the actual feeder itself, just to try and entice a fish to go down for it, or at least find it in the coloured water. And it was amazing how that worked. I had a couple of bream on that, but then I had a huge carp of about 17 pounds, which really got me back in it. And that was it. But I ended up with £29 altogether. I ended up winning the section again, which I was really pleased about, especially from there. But to be fair, you know, I was only about £6 off qualifying, which was unbelievable. Yeah, I think £35 qualified. So again, you know, I've got to put that down as a chance. I mean, one more bite is a £6 carp on there. Is very easily achievable if you approach it in the right way, and I honestly feel as though I should have been able to find another carp over the 5-hour period. So I'd won the section, which was great. Obviously another few quid to cover the cost of the day and everything, but you know, I've been kicking myself just wondering how I could have found another carp on that one. And then the most recent qualifier, which was last weekend, was Carmill Dam. Now, I didn't originally have a ticket for this one, and that's because this weekend we would have been in France for the World Feeder Fishing Championships, which due to COVID and everything has been delayed. So I didn't have a ticket for that, but then a good friend of mine, Joe Farrell, messaged me asking me if I wanted a ticket for it. Sadly, he was having to quarantine. So I snapped up the opportunity to go there. Now, Carmill, I've never been there where it's fished well. You know, it's a venue that I only seem to go there or find myself there when it's fishing really hard, or it's in the depths of winter. The last time I was there, I qualified for the Golden Reel final with £6, and that was off one of the good pegs. So that just gives you an idea of how hard it usually fishes. However, I'd heard it had been fishing well. Now, I drew peg 90, not an area I've ever been in before. And Dean Barlow kindly offered to give me a bit of advice if I called him when I drew, so I did that, and Dean gave me a bit of information, so thanks for that, Dean, if you're watching. And some of the lads on the bank gave me information as well, just warning me more than anything that if I was going to put a short line in, it would be snaggy. So if you are going to fish that line, you either need to fish really short or try and find a clear spot. And I didn't want to come really close in. I felt if I could find that 20-25 metre range, I think the fish would have fed a bit more confidently there, so that's what I did. I spent quite a bit of time with the bomb before the match trying to find a clear spot, and I actually found a spot at 25 metres which felt fishable, so that's where I opted to fish. And I also fed a line at 40 metres. I'd heard they'd been catching lots of little skimmers, and so that was it. The plan was to start at 25 metres, feed the long line at the start, but leave it to settle. And the ideal scenario would be I would never pick that longer rod up. You know, I would stay at 25 metres for the whole match, and that's exactly what happened. I never had to pick the other rod up. However, the first hour, it took me a while to work it out. I was feeding a few pinkies, chopped worm, and I was getting indications, but there were lots of little roach there. I was missing some bites. So I had to go through the process that we usually have to go through of trying to make your peg and the way that you're fishing much more efficient. And that was the usual case of changing the pattern and the size of the hook, changing the hook length, changing the actual feeder itself, changing the consistency of the ground bait, and all that sort of thing. But first cast, I actually got caught up on something. The feeder got caught on something. That was first cast, and I thought, well, I can't really be fishing there, so I simply went about a metre to the left of that original spot, and that was fine. For the full 5 hours I could fish there. I never got snagged up. But after about 45-50 minutes, I kind of found a combination of all those things I've just talked about that was working. I was getting bites, I was hooking more fish than what I was missing, and gradually I just ticked over putting fish in the net, and that was it. That really was the plan for the match. But things kept changing. You know, I kept getting a little roach. I cut everything out, so I was only feeding worm and the fish meal ground bait that I was using, and it was just a case of trying to hit every bite, making sure you were going to come back with a fish. And at the end I'd finished up with 100 fish for £23, which I was really pleased about. I ended up winning the section again, which was obviously very welcome. I got the section money for that, so that was good. But sadly, you know, we heard that down to the right there I'd been catching fish steady all day, skimmers, and that was the case. You know, £28 won the zone. I had 23, but I'm absolutely certain that had I got that first hour right quicker, that £28 was certainly on the cards, and that's without any sort of bonus fish coming along as well. So I've got to kind of count that as a chance, you know. But I mean, I haven't fished the venue for 3 years, you know, so I suppose I could have wasted much more time had I not started ringing those changes when I did. You know, I could have just happily just carried on doing what I was doing, but I'm glad I made the changes. Some of the changes really worked absolutely perfectly. The combination of hook bait with the size of the hook and all that sort of thing, changing the consistency of the ground bait, cutting the pinkies out, all those little things worked absolutely brilliantly. However, I still caught roach. You know, I don't know why there was roach, so many roach there. I don't know. I don't know if the other lads had that problem as well, or whether it's just that area, something to do with the depth. I don't know. But yeah, like I say, it was nice to win the section again, but it's proving a very challenging competition this year for me. I've got about 4 more tickets. I would have been able to fish a couple more, but I've got other commitments on those days which I've got to keep. So it looks like I've got 4 more opportunities at having a crack at this event. But I just wanted to update you to let you know how the campaign has been going. I will be updating you on the other matches that are coming, and it's been great to see so many of you actually competing in this competition this year. Some of you 3-4 years ago started watching my videos on this channel who had never entered competitions like that, and now I'm seeing you on all the qualifiers, and I really like that. It's nice to put faces to names. That was just a bit of a download for you. Just wanted to let you know how I've been getting on and what the key details were for each match. And hopefully some of these key details that I've told you about are going to help you put more fish in your net. So thanks for watching. I really hope you've appreciated this upload. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you next time.